Victoria Nuland, neocon of neocons, decided to come to Niger. I wonder why. So she went to Niger to try and speak with the coup leaders. They wouldn't even meet with her. They wouldn't even meet with her. I mean, it's the best response. The best response. So let me show you this. All right. So there are two good pieces here. I'm reading to you from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. She went to Niger despite the airspace being closed, which is weird, right? Obviously, the CIA or the State Department have some flight. They flew her in. The French are also violating Niger's airspace by continuing to run planes in, right? But again, they're just friends, right? They're not here to step on anyone's toes. She went to meet with Tiani, and he said no, and she had to sit down with 3 colonels and a general. Okay, so they told Victoria Nuland, you are not allowed to meet with Bazoum, who's the deposed president, and you are not allowed to meet with Tiani, who's the head of the army and now the de facto leader of the country, right? they wouldn't even give her 1 minute of their time. Now, she did sit down with this man. Now, he is a general, okay, who has been essentially groomed by the United States. They've been working on this guy for a couple of decades, right? So he's Brigadier General Moussa Barmou, right? And the Wall Street Journal describes him as long courted by Washington as a partner against Islamist extremism. So they thought that because he heads the special forces in Niger, and that his troops have worked alongside the American troops for so long. Yes, and they've cooperated together, and that he went to the he went to the United States to study there, even that they could influence him into reversing the coup, and he basically just told them to piss off. So she Victoria Nuland had to sit down with him. She had to sit down with a brigadier general, the head of Niger's special forces, that the United States themselves had been grooming and curating for years now, for decades actually, for 30 years, only to be told, no, goodbye, we do not accept any of your demands and we do not care for any of your threats. Nothing. She left without a single breakthrough. So as the Wall Street Journal say, that Barmou is the guy the U.S. military courted for almost 30 years. He's a guy the U.S. sent to Washington, D.C.'s prestigious National Defense University. He has invited American officers to his home for dinner. And he's in charge of the elite special forces, crucial to stemming the flood of Al-Qaeda and Islamic State fighters across Western Africa. In the 2 weeks since Niger's coup, Barmou has emerged as the main diplomatic channel between the U.S. and the junta. American officers and diplomats have his number in their cell phones and think he is their best chance of restoring democracy. Whenever you see the word, or the expression rather, of restoring democracy, what they mean is restoring American and French rule in Niger. Barmou sat down in Niamey, Niger's capital, for 2 hours on Monday with Victoria Nuland, the acting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State. Oh, my lady has been promoted, I see. She's been promoted. The queen bitch. Just to give you, as a quick side note, just to give you her rap sheet. This is from Code Pink. They did an excellent rundown. So Victoria Nuland, as I just read to you, is now the number 2 in the entire State Department. So under Blinken, you will now have Victoria Nuland. Number 2. I mean, I've never seen someone fail upwards so well, right? She does better than most journalists in Britain and America, right? They lie and lie and they get promoted and promoted. Lie some more, get promoted some more. And in Victoria Nuland's case, you bully and you kill some more and you get promoted more, right? So the entire problem in Ukraine right now, half of the problem in Ukraine is her doing, right? Not to give her too much credit, but you could say half. Easily. There's this famous phone call that she had that was leaked, where she's on the phone and she's talking about Ukraine, right? Because you remember when the Americans did this coup in 2014 in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian president had to flee to Russia. By coincidence, a flood of American officials just out in the open running about Kiev, right? You had McCain, who's another neocon, and who also found himself with jihadists in Syria. What a coincidence. And Victoria Nuland, right? So she was there working, I would say behind the scenes, but she wasn't really behind the scenes. She was on stage. She was center stage doing this in front of everybody. And there's that phone call where she's like, fuck the EU, right? Which really embodies how much, the Americans value their so-called relationship and partnership with Europe. There is no partnership. Europe is a vassal, right? It's a vassal continent to the Americans, right? As I said, even during my speech last week in London, the American strategy is that you keep Europe weak, you keep Europe under America's heel, and then use Europe to attack the Russians with. But just to quickly give you as a side note, okay, her rap sheet. So Nuland was Dick Cheney's deputy national security advisor from 2003 to 2005 during the illegal U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. In 2005, she became ambassador to NATO, where she lobbied Europe to participate in the occupation of Afghanistan. In 2013, Nuland was nominated to act as Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, where she was supposed to employ diplomacy and relations with Russia, Ukraine, and former Soviet states. But instead, Nuland and the White House partnered with the Ukrainian far right. Like those people that I saw waving Nazi flags in London opposite the memorial for the women of World War II. Yeah, that far right in Ukraine. Funneling $5 billion at Ukraine to overthrow its democratically elected president and engineer a transition government to privatize Ukraine and prepare for war with Russia. Nuland passed out pastries during the Maidan coup before Viktor Yanukovych fled under a hail of bullets. Nuland was caught in the scandal involving the leaked phone call. Right, so this is exactly what I was talking to you about, where she says, F the EU. Victoria Nuland is a dangerous war hawk, not a diplomat. She should be tried at The Hague, not elevated to run the State Department. What a brilliant ending. It's like as if I'd written it myself. I love it. No, but seriously, this is who they sent to Niger. Out of all the people in the United States, 320 million people in the United States, most of them good people. Who do they send to calm the situation in Niger? This bitch. Wow. I mean, I would seriously be offended and take that as a sign of aggression. I really mean that. I'm not saying that like, figuratively. When you send Victoria Nuland, you are sending a bully. You are committing an act of aggression when you send this person after what she's done, after what I just read to you, how many people she's killed, how many countries she's helped destroy. Jesus. I mean, she's the devil himself or herself. I don't say that often. I don't say that ever, but she's really the devil incarnate. I wonder why she couldn't, achieve a breakthrough. I wonder why. Anyway, so she had to sit down with a Nigerian general, right, that they had courted. And this is what happened. The talks proved frustrating. Nuland, knowing Bermu's long affinity for the United States, urged him to broker a deal that would allow Niger and its longtime Western allies to get back to fighting Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and Boko Haram militants and stop the country from becoming another African outpost for Russia and its paramilitary Wagner group. Down here, you can see the drone base, which I've spoken to you guys about for a couple of years now. I mean, it's something that's cost $100 to $200 million. It's the largest drone base the Americans have in the world, and they put it in Niger, right? So it's basically a launching pad for attacking not just targets inside Niger, but anywhere they want. And of course, the Americans are not going to tell you, yeah, this is an imperialist outpost. No. They're going to tell you, we're your friends. We're only here to help you. We swear. We're just here to fight terrorists. The bad guys. We're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Yes? Here's another base. Commando base over here and over here, right? So both to the southeast and to the west of Niger. And then you have a U.S. Special Operations Headquarters south of that. Also, these are near to both of them near the border with Burkina Faso. You can see here, they've highlighted the countries that support the coup in Niger in yellow and those who are against it in green. Remember, whenever you read a map, especially one that appears in the Western news, do you notice how they try to condition your brain? So Assad forces in Syria are always red, right? Red representing danger. The Russian forces, red, danger. And here, if you're against the coup, right? If you're against the Western puppet being removed, which you should be, then it's in green. Everybody should be against the coup, yes? We need our puppet back. Obviously, you shouldn't read too much into the colors, but it is something that you see on every goddamn map in Syria. Every goddamn map, without exception. So, the US has spent some $500 million building up Niger's defense forces, including at least $110 million on the American-built drone base in the town of Agadez, and stations some 1,100 American troops in the country. In the wake of the military revolt, the US has suspended its training of Nigerian forces and cut some other military assistance to Niger. Should the State Department formally declare the uprising a coup, American law would require further reductions in military aid. The United States has vowed to continue food and other humanitarian assistance to Niger. Yes, well, I don't know how that's going to get there since the airspace has been closed and the borders have also been shut, both by Niger and the neighboring countries. Especially ECOWAS and the neighboring countries in ECOWAS. Forget Mali and Burkina Faso because they're on Niger's side. But, you're going to see a situation now, I guarantee you this, just like you saw in Venezuela, where they're going to say, why isn't Maduro letting any humanitarian assistance in? Same thing in Syria. Why isn't Bashar al-Assad letting any humanitarian assistance in? And in Niger, this will be all the more important because Niger, as I said, on the Human Development Index is number 2 or at the bottom of the list, right? So second last or at the bottom of the list. So they'll make a bigger stink out of it and say, look, this junta are not letting it of the humanitarian, the benevolent, chivalrous aid that we, the Westerners, bestow upon our Nigerian subjects. They're not letting it in. They're irresponsible. They're unfit to run this country. Bring back Bazoum. We are concerned for Bazoum's health. Yeah, same song and dance. But they won't tell you that it's actually ECOWAS that have shut their borders and that, the French and Americans are perfectly capable of flying in planes when it comes to Victoria Nuland or, freeing some terrorists that are now suddenly needed to stir chaos in the country, right? Those planes work absolutely fine, especially in violation of the closing of the airspace. But everything is the junta's fault. Barmou, the brigadier general, is well aware the coup could cost him critical combat support. No more joint training, nor tactical advice from U.S. Green Berets. Green Berets are the special forces in the U.S., or one of the special forces. Or American drones sending real-time surveillance. This is what Barmou said to the Wall Street Journal. Pay attention to this quote. It's very short. He said that, quote, if that is the price to pay for our sovereignty, then let it be. That's what Barmou wrote to the Wall Street Journal a few days after the coup, and he did not respond to any further questions for this article. I mean, from what I can see here, from what we can tell, it's no wonder Victoria Nuland was unable to break him, because she's dealing with someone with principles. If every Arab and African leader were like this, you would have no neocolonialism. You would have none. Unfortunately, the president of Nigeria is allowing himself to do the bidding of the French and the Americans. That this is a fact. This is what he's doing. He is not serving his own country. He is not serving any of the countries in ECOWAS. He's not serving Niger or the people of Niger. He's not doing any good for Africa, nor the Sahara Sahel. And he knows very well that if he starts sending in troops into Niger, that the whole place is going to be destabilized. And as a matter of fact, even the Russians now have said that, and not just said, they have warned ECOWAS against doing anything. And the Russians, for the time being, they are basically saying neither for nor against the coup, but in favor of a diplomatic settlement, right? And warning ECOWAS not to take any military action because it will destabilize the entire region. So this is what is happening right now. You have Western countries that are using ECOWAS to do their bidding to, as one of the people I showed you in the video mentioned, la main invisible, the invisible hand. This is how the levers of power work behind the scenes. And they do this often in other areas of the world, right? Just like you have in when it comes to Arab countries, you're going to have some Arab countries that are, being used to coerce, to bully, and to keep other Arab leaders in line, especially those who are becoming too independent and thinking too much for themselves. You saw, for example, recently Morocco. In Morocco, which is an amazing country, but unfortunately, the leadership, the king, in exchange for Israel recognizing Moroccan sovereignty and ownership of the Western Sahara, Morocco will now open an embassy in Israel. But things can change. Yep, things can change just as quickly as, they can be gone as quickly as they came. I think with Saudi Arabia, that was a good example of how quickly the tides changed. But, in this case, you cannot say that this is just the case of some, a bunch of officers that decided to get rid of the president, right? You can see from the number of people that are coming out on the street that this is the sentiment of the country. And I guarantee you, not everyone is going to like what is happening in Niger. I bet you're going to have a good chunk of people who are against the coup. Just like in every country, you're going to have people who disagree and those who agree with something. But in this case, the majority of people support this move. Not because they necessarily favor Tiane or the junta, but because they know what the French have done, and this is a rejection of centuries of French colonialism. That's what this is about. This is what you need to understand. And like usual, in the press, they're just so blind to this. They just can't read the situation. So someone like Victoria Nuland, she thinks she could just come in and order them around and tell them what to do. They don't care. They do not care. And it's nothing to do with the Russians protecting them. The Pentagon themselves, Tony Blinken, the head of the State Department, he himself, they've all said that Russia has nothing to do with what's happening in Niger. Yes, Prigozhin is celebrating it, okay, head of Wagner, but just because there is real anti-colonial sentiment in Africa does not mean that it's not anything to do with Russia. Yeah, of course, Russia is going to exploit that. It should exploit that. Why shouldn't it? The Russians didn't colonize Africa like France and Belgium and Britain did. They just didn't, right? So obviously they have higher moral ground when it comes to that by a mile. So even if the Russians use that sentiment for whatever purpose, right? It doesn't change the fact that people in Africa, people in Arabia, literally, truly, legitimately feel that way. They are really genuinely sick of France. They're genuinely sick of Britain. After what happened, it's their right to be. The French would do well to tuck their tail between their legs and just leave the same way they left Mali and Burkina Faso and just get this over with quickly, because that base is not going to stay there for long. Now, one last note I will add, and this is pure speculation. Okay, this next point. The junta in Niger did not annul their military cooperation with the Americans. Okay, I told you they canceled 5 agreements, defense agreements with the French, meaning we want you gone, but they didn't do that with the Americans. Now, even though Victoria Nuland didn't make any progress, right, according to her, and the State Department spokesperson, there could be, this is just I'm just speculation, but there could be an opening for the Americans to take the French place, and especially when it comes to the military base that the French have, and the exploitation and mining of uranium, gold, oil. Niger has everything. The reason people are coming out with Russia flags is because they like I said, it's a rejection of the West, and they would definitely prefer to have economic and military partnerships with the Russians over anybody else, because they know the difference between the West and Russia. But don't put it past the Americans, and don't put it past Victoria Nuland. This happened already with AUKUS. Remember, Australia had a deal with the French to build diesel submarines. The French would sell them diesel submarines. And what happened? The UK and the US told Australia, we will give you nuclear-powered submarines. And the whole deal with France just went down the toilet, and the French were very upset. And even though all of these countries, in the case of France and the UK and US, are NATO and allies and members, doesn't matter. When it comes down to it, the Americans will put themselves first, definitely, before everybody and anyone, and they always do that. So there is a possibility, even if it's just a tiny possibility, that the Americans are waiting to see what happens and how the new leadership react to their cooperation with America, and having this brigadier general that we just talked about, and his good ties with American officers and so on, that might be an avenue that they exploit. So they might be waiting for the French to get out, and then they will just usurp whatever resources and control the French had. You have to understand that the anti-French and anti-colonial, it's really what it's about is anti-colonial. It's not about anti-French. Just for the sake of, they don't like baguettes or something. No. This is people in Niger saying we are sick of being exploited. You should not underestimate the level of anti-colonial sentiment in Niger. They would rather, if it comes down to it, they will definitely choose the Americans over the French. But obviously their first choice would be the Russians. I'm just saying, don't underestimate the Americans. You saw this very recently when it came to AUKUS with the submarines, that the Americans screwed the French. They might as well just do it again now in Niger, right? Why not? If it puts them in a better position. And the Americans, another goal of theirs is not just to get the French out because they care so much about Niger's anti-colonial sentiment. No, they're going to do that so they put themselves in a better position and prevent Russia from coming onto the scene. Again, I'm just speculating here. This is just, we're hypothesizing. I don't think it's necessarily, likely, but it is a possibility, especially given recent events. It's just a possibility. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. I think obviously what most people in Niger, and you heard what they were saying, what they want is both the Americans and the French to be gone, period.